Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
As we head into a new NFL season, one of the things that most NFL fans like to do is to predict who will wind up in the Super Bowl in February. Now, picking who will end up in New Orleans for Super Bowl 59 is the late summer equivalent of filling out your brackets for March Madness. I'm guilty of being one of those people. Some of my friends and I get together and make predictions to determine not only all of the division winners, but the eventual Super Bowl champions, but also who will be the league's MVP, the coach of the year, and the offensive and defensive rookies of the year. It's a fun exercise, and we do this simply for bragging rights. So I guess you could say this is our version of fantasy football. Now, sports writers have been forecasting the season as long as there have been an NFL. Some of these professional prognosticators seem like they know where they're talking about, and then there's some not so much. I guess it depends on the year. Hello once again, I am Dana Augusta, your host of the Historically Speaking Sports Podcast, the sports history podcast you didn't know you needed, as we give you the best of sports from back in the day. In this episode, we're going to be talking about NFL predictions. We all do it, whether we get paid for it or not. And it seems like everyone has a prediction for the upcoming NFL season. Some seem like they're looking into a crystal ball, while others are maybe looking at something else. In this show, we're going to go back in the day and examine what sports writers and football observers were thinking, heading into certain seasons beginning in 1984. We will compare what certain league insiders wrote heading into the 1984, 1994, 2004, and the 2014 seasons and how those predictions turned out. So get ready for a few laughs. Yet, actually I ran across some that were pretty accurate as to what happened. So I guess you could say it's an eclectic mix. Later in the show, I'll also reveal my own official picks for this upcoming NFL season. While I'm busting other people's chops about their prediction, I might as well let everybody know what I'm thinking. Will anyone prevent the Chiefs from a three-peat? Are the Texans for real? Will the Cowboys and Jets satisfy their fans? And most importantly, what will my Chargers do? We have all of that coming up on this all-new Welcome Back to Football edition of the Historically Speaking Sports Podcast here on the Sports History Network. Heading into every NFL season, maybe since the age of 10, I would always anxiously await the different NFL preview issues, whether it was Sports Illustrated or Street and Smith or any different football publications. And as I got older, I would check out different football websites on the internet to see who the so-called experts figured would be in the Super Bowl, and also, just as importantly, how they thought my Chargers would do in the upcoming season. Now, sometimes, although rarely, I would agree with them, but far too often I would feel I know as much as they do, and with my arrogant nature from my youth, I knew my football knowledge was far more than most people. But what I found both interesting and enlightening, and equally entertaining, is to go back and see how far away some NFL forecasters were, or in some cases, how close they were to actually picking the eventual Super Bowl participants. With that being said, I decided to go back 40 years and check out what the experts predicted what would happen in the NFL season of 1984 and subsequent years that ended with the number 4, 1984, 94, 2004, and 2014. And like I said, some were interesting, some were pretty spot on, yet some were downright hilarious. So right now we're going to start with the year of 1984. Heading into that season, the Los Angeles Raiders were the defending Super Bowl champions, led by Super Bowl MVP Marcus Allen. They crushed the Washington Redskins 38-9 in Tampa in a game that most people predicted was going to be a very competitive Super Bowl. The Raiders defeated the Seattle Seahawks in the AFC Championship game, and yes, for some of our younger listeners, the Seahawks were once in the AFC. Meanwhile, the Washington Redskins had beat the San Francisco 49ers in what was called the Forgotten Classic in the NFC Championship game. And no one knew it at the time, but the Raiders in Super Bowl 18 would be the last AFC team to win the Super Bowl for the next 14 seasons. An AFC team would finally be victorious in Super Bowl 32 when John Elway and the Denver Broncos would finally get over the hump and beat the Green Bay Packers in January of 1998. And heading into the 1984 season, there was a lot to look forward to. It would be the first of the Colts in Indianapolis. Bears Hall of Fame running back Walter Payton was on the verge of breaking the all-time record held by Jim Brown, and Super Bowl 19 would be the first Super Bowl broadcast on ABC on January 20th of 1985. Now, for those that are of a certain age, the NFL in the mid-1980s was somewhat different. There were only 3 divisions in each conference, East, Central, and West, and the interconference matchups in 1984 featured the AFC East playing the NFC East, the AFC Central playing the NFC West, and the AFC West playing the NFC Central. For the 1984 season preview, I found the Street and Smith Pro Football Preview issue, which I remember actually having, seeing the cover of it with Hall of Fame running back John Riggins highlighted on the cover really brought back some memories. Inside were the writers Don Pearson, who predicted the NFC, and Larry Felser, who predicted the AFC. And heading into the 1984 season, this is what they came up with. Starting in the NFC East, they predicted Washington to repeat as NFC East champions, followed by the Dallas Cowboys with quarterback Danny White, who at the time were in a quarterback competition with one Gary Hogeboom. Coming in third were the then St. Louis Football Cardinals, just 4 years away from relocating to Phoenix. They would be followed in the standings with the Ron Jaworski-led Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants finishing at the bottom of the division. Meanwhile, in the Central, they predicted the Detroit Lions to finish as division champs. Yes, just like this year. The Lions were led at quarterback by Eric Hipple and running back Billy Sims, who was just a placeholder for another Lions running back that would later wear the number 20. They would be followed by the Chicago Bears, who was just 1 year away from winning their first and only Super Bowl to date. After the Bears were the Minnesota Vikings, who in 1984 was not so concerned with the team's performance, but could the Metrodome roof stay in place? Like the kids say, if you know, you know. Finishing last in the Central, Pearson predicted the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who was in the midst of their dark ages and will remain there until the mid-1990s. Then there's the NFC West, which is the clearest example of hilarity when looking back at these things. Now, I don't know the author of this piece, Don Pearson. I assume he's a well-accomplished sports reporter, but this was a big-time swing and miss. He predicted the winner of the NFC West would be the New Orleans Saints. Yes, the Saints. Now, to be fair, looking back on it, I could really see where he was coming from. The season before, the Saints were on the verge of making the playoffs for the first time in team history, but a late field goal by Rams kicker Mike Lansford in the final game of the regular season of 1983 prevented that. And many writers felt that the new version of Bum's Bunch led by head coach Bum Phillips, will continue to improve, especially with running back George Rogers in the backfield. But what really set expectations even higher was their new acquisition at quarterback named Richard Todd from the New York Jets. It would be an open quarterback competition with Todd and veteran Kenny Stabler that would make the whole team better. Finishing second would be the aforementioned Rams, led by future Hall of Fame running back Eric Dickerson. More on him later. Followed by the third place San Francisco 49ers. 49ers? Third? Okay, we'll see about that. Rounding out the division will be the Atlanta Falcons, who had so much promise at the beginning of the decade. Over in the AFC, the Raiders were slated to not only repeat as division champs, but conference representative in Super Bowl 19, according to Larry Felser of Street and Smith magazine. Following the Raiders in the standings would be the San Diego Chargers, still in the midst of the Air Coryell era. The third place team they predicted were the Seattle Seahawks, who were in the AFC title game the season before, and followed by the Denver Broncos and a young, strong-armed quarterback named John Elway. And rounding out the AFC West were the Kansas City Chiefs. And I know for some people they may be hard to comprehend. The Chiefs finishing in last? In the AFC Central would be the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were entering year one AB after Bradshaw. But the Steelers were still a formidable team and now a lot younger. They were predicted to be followed in the standings by the Cincinnati Bengals, who were in the Super Bowl just 3 seasons earlier. Then the Cleveland Browns, and then rounding out the AFC Central were the then Houston Oilers, that would feature their north of the border import named Warren Moon. Over in the AFC East, the predicted team to finish in the top spot in that division were the New England Patriots, led by veteran quarterback Steve Grogan, but was getting some competition from second-year signal caller Tony Eason. Plus, the Patriots were expecting big things from their first-round draft choice wide receiver Irving Fryer, who they predicted would be the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year. They would be followed in the standings by the Miami Dolphins and young quarterback Dan Marino, entering his second year in the NFL, saying that the jury was still out on him, unquote. Yeah, right. Next in the standings would be the Buffalo Bills, then the Richard Todd-less New York Jets, and the newly minted Indianapolis Colts. In this edition of the Street and Smith magazine, they predicted a rematch of the Super Bowl from the season before, Redskins and Raiders, with the Redskins beating the Raiders for their second championship in 3 seasons. The writers also predicted the NFL MVP that year would be Dan Fouts of the Chargers, with Bum Phillips named Coach of the Year. And these are only predictions, folks. So, what happened? The season ended with Super Bowl 19 when the San Francisco 49ers defeated the Dolphins 38-16 at Stanford Stadium in California, broadcast for the first time, as we mentioned before, on ABC. The 49ers became the first team in NFL history to win 15 games in the regular season and to win 18 in an entire season, including the postseason. Additionally, 2 major offensive records were set this year. Quarterback Dan Marino establishing a new single-season passing yards record of 5,084 yards, and Rams running back Eric Dickerson establishing a new single-season rushing yards record with 2,105 yards. Another statistical record was broken when Mark Gastineau recorded the most sacks in a single season with 22, which was later surpassed by Michael Strahan in 2001. Also during this season, the San Diego Chargers wide receiver Charlie Joyner became the all-time leader in career receptions. He set that mark in the game between the Chargers and Steelers at Pittsburgh's Three River Stadium. Then in Week 10, in a game again between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Seattle Seahawks, Seattle set numerous NFL records for interception returns, including the most interception return yardage in the game and most interceptions returned for touchdowns in the game with 4. All touchdowns were over 50 yards in length. The Seahawks also tied an NFL record with 63 defensive takeaways on the season, thanks in part to Defensive Rookie of the Year defensive back Kenny Easley. The Offensive Rookie of the Year was Pittsburgh wide receiver Louis Lips, who was part of the attack that saw the Steelers reach the AFC Championship game. Seattle's Chuck Knox was named the NFL Coach of the Year. The AFC divisional winners included the Miami Dolphins with a 14-2 regular season record, Pittsburgh finishing 9-7, and the Broncos, led by Elway, went 13-3 on the season, followed by wild card Seattle at 12-4 and the Raiders at 11-5. Over in the NFC, the aforementioned 49ers were 15-1, with the Redskins at 11-5, and the surprising Chicago Bears at 10-6. The wild cards, the New York Giants, who were predicted to finish last in the AFC East, actually finished with a playoff record 9-7 by virtue of a tiebreaker, and the Los Angeles Rams at 10-6. As for the Saints, they finished 7-9 on the season, once again failed to make the playoffs, despite the acquisition of Earl Campbell midway through the regular season. Richard Todd would throw 11 touchdown passes and 19 interceptions and would be sacked 33 times on the season. Remember, predictions are not an exact science. Moving forward to 1994. I was in college at the time and, of course, had other interests outside of sports, but it was still a major part of my life. In 1994, the NFL season, it was the 75th regular season of the National Football League, and to honor the NFL's 75th season, a special anniversary logo was designed, and each player wore a patch on their jerseys with this logo throughout the season. Also, a selection committee of media and league personnel named a special 75th anniversary all-time team honoring the best NFL players from the first 75 seasons. Also, which to me was really cool, was for 1 week of the season, and I believe it was the 4th week of that year, I could be mistaken, I think it was week 4. Each team that Sunday and Monday night wore throwback uniforms to celebrate that team's history and the history of the National Football League. In 1994, the Phoenix Cardinals had officially changed their name to the Arizona Cardinals, attempting to widen their appeal to the entire state of Arizona instead of just the Phoenix area. The name was initially resisted by team owner Bill Bidwell. Also, a dramatic change to the NFL landscape was on the horizon. This marked the last season until 2016 that the city of Los Angeles had an NFL team, and the last one until 2017 that the city had two. Both the Rams and Raiders left the city following the season. The Rams moved east to St. Louis, Missouri after being in Los Angeles for 49 years, while the Raiders left after 12 seasons to return to their previous home in Oakland. The Rams eventually returned in 2016 after failing to reach an agreement with St. Louis on a new stadium, followed by the Chargers in 2017 due to a stadium proposal being voted down by most of the voters in San Diego. Heading into the 94 season, the current NFL dynasty was located in the Dallas Metroplex, as the Cowboys were the defending Super Bowl champions. They had defeated the Buffalo Bills in Super Bowl 28 in Atlanta, with Emmitt Smith being named Super Bowl MVP. This was the height of the 90s Cowboys dynasty, and if you were talking Cowboys, there was bound to have some controversy somewhere. And of course, there was. During the offseason, team owner Jerry Jones had replaced the two-time Super Bowl winning coach Jimmy Johnson with former University of Oklahoma head coach Barry Switzer. And many pundits speculated that the Cowboys could have chosen anyone as head coach and the team would continue to win. The Cowboys were led, of course, by the triplets, Troy Aikman at quarterback, the aforementioned Emmitt Smith and at running back, and wide receiver Michael Irvin. Meanwhile, there were their opponents in the previous year's Super Bowl, the Buffalo Bills, who had appeared in the last 4 Super Bowls and, of course, lost all of them. By this season, many fans and members of the media had called the Bills America's uninvited guest for playing in the last 4 Super Bowls and losing each one seemingly worse than they did the season before. Heading into the season, the top rivalry in the NFL were the Cowboys and the 49ers, the two teams that had met in the 2 previous NFC Championship games. Joe Montana, who was playing in Kansas City by now, was pushed aside by Steve Young, and the team still had Jerry Rice and John Taylor, and new contributors including William Floyd and Ricky Watters that made the 49ers a significant threat to the Cowboys in the NFC. Many so-called experts, including Sports Illustrated writer Peter King, said that the NFC title game should be considered the Super Bowl, and the Cowboys and 49ers would be in what he figured to be one of the greatest NFC title games ever. And the Super Bowl would basically be a consolation game that will double as a coronation. In the 1994 edition of the Street and Smith NFL Preview Edition, the same writers from 10 years earlier, Larry Felser and Don Pearson, wrote these predictions. Pearson and Felser forecasted that Super Bowl 29 would be indeed the Cowboys and Bills Part 3. With that would be a loud scream and gnashing of teeth that would envelop the entire nation of the mid-1990s. Their predictions also included Emmitt Smith would be named league MVP. Coach of the Year was forecasted to be Art Shell of the Los Angeles, soon-to-be Oakland Raiders. And Offensive Rookie of the Year would be first-year player from San Diego State running back Marshall Faulk of the Indianapolis Colts. Now, breaking down the divisions over in the NFC, the Cowboys were predicted to finish atop the NFC East, followed by the New York Giants, led by the defending NFL Coach of the Year Dan Reeves, formerly of Denver, and quarterback Phil Simms, who inexplicably was still playing. Following the Giants in the standings would be Steve Berline-led Arizona Cardinals, then Philadelphia Eagles coached by, checks notes, Rich Kotite. Please continue your laughter. And the Washington Redskins bringing up the rear. In the NFC West, the San Francisco 49ers were the class of the division, and would be once again one of the favorites to win the NFC. They would be followed by the New Orleans Saints, led by Coach Jim Mora and new quarterback Jim Everett, who was just acquired from the Los Angeles Rams. They would be followed by the Atlanta Falcons and new coach June Jones and quarterback Jeff George, followed by the Los Angeles Rams, who seemed to be counting down the days before moving to St. Louis. Now, I've always wondered this. You're going to purposely leave Los Angeles for St. Louis? On purpose? The most competitive division in the NFC would be the NFC Central, with the Packers winning that division. The Packers with Brett Favre, Sterling Sharp, Reggie White, and coach Mike Holmgren. Tied on their heels would be the Minnesota Vikings, who had just acquired Warren Moon from the Houston Oilers. Then would be the Chicago Bears, finishing in third in the NFC Central, with second-year coach Dave Wannstedt and new quarterback Eric Kramer, who was the signal caller with the Lions a year before. Speaking of the Lions, they were predicted to finish fourth, just a year after winning the division, and finally the perennial bottom dwellers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Street and Smith magazine picked the Cowboys, 49ers, and Packers, winning the NFC East, West, and Central divisions respectively, with the Giants, Cardinals, and Vikings as wildcard teams. Now, over in the AFC, the Buffalo Bills were picked once again to win the AFC East, followed by the Dan Marino and Don Shula-led Miami Dolphins. Following the Dolphins would be the New England Patriots with coach Bill Parcells and young quarterback Drew Bledsoe. Then the New York Jets with Boomer Esiason and first-year head coach Pete Carroll. Yes, that Pete Carroll, who would go on to win a national championship with USC and later a Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks. Rounding out the AFC East, the Indianapolis coach and their coach, Ted Marchibroda, and quarterback Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh. Gee, I wonder what he's doing now. Anyway, in the AFC West, the LA Raiders with coach Art Shell, the first African-American coach in NFL modern history, did a typical thing and got a former veteran quarterback hero and coached them into wearing silver and black. And that would be Jeff Hostetler, who a few seasons earlier led the New York Giants to a win over the Bills in Super Bowl 25. They would be followed in the standings by the Denver Broncos, still piloted by John Elway, but now coached by Wade Phillips. Then there are the Kansas City Chiefs, who, led by Joe Montana and Marcus Allen, were in the AFC title game the year before. Then the Seattle Seahawks with second-year quarterback Rick Meyer, followed by the San Diego Chargers with premier linebacker Junior Seau, and according to Felser, a very pedestrian offense led by quarterback Stan Humphries and coach Bobby Ross. Street and Smith had and a number of other publications predicted the Chargers to finish fifth in the five-team AFC West. Once again, NFL predictions are not an exact science. In the AFC Central, the Steelers, led by Bill Cowher and quarterback Neil O'Donnell, and the unique weapon known as Slash, Cordell Stewart, were slated to be the team to beat in that division, followed by the Houston Oilers without Warren Moon, followed by the Cleveland Browns, and then the Cincinnati Bengals. Teams that would qualify for the AFC postseason would be the Bills winning the East, followed by the Raiders winning the West, and the Steelers winning the Central. Dolphins, Broncos, and Chiefs would be the AFC wildcard teams. As it turned out, it was just slightly different. The season ended with Super Bowl 29, when the San Francisco 49ers, no big surprise, defeated the San Diego Chargers. Okay, huge surprise. The final was 49-26 at Joe Robbie Stadium in Miami, making it the first season of the 1990s not to feature the Buffalo Bills in the Super Bowl. The Chargers were the NFL's surprise team, starting the year 6-0 and finishing at 11-5, beating the Steelers 17-13 at Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh in the AFC Championship game. In the NFC title game, the 49ers beat the Cowboys 38-28 at Candlestick. Well, at least they got that right. In the final standings, the Cowboys were the NFC East champions at 12-4, followed by the Giants at 9-7, then the Cardinals at 8-8, and rounding up the East were the Eagles at 7-9 and Washington at 3-13. In the West, San Francisco was 13-3, then New Orleans and Atlanta both at 7-9, and rounding out the NFC West would be the Rams at 4-12, again counting down their move to St. Louis. In the Central, the Vikings would win the division at 10-6, while Green Bay, Detroit, and Chicago all finished at 9-7, each making the playoffs with the Buccaneers at 6-10. The AFC turned out this way. Miami would win the division at 10-6, while the Patriots would be second only by a tiebreaker, also holding a 10-6 mark. In third place would be the surprising Indianapolis Colts at 8-8, then the Buffalo Bills at 7-9, and then the Jets at 6-10. In the Central, the Pittsburgh Steelers would be 12-4, best record in the AFC, followed by the Cleveland Browns at 11-5. Then Cincinnati at 3-13, and then the Houston Oilers at 2-14. Finally, out west, the Chargers would win the division at 11-5. Then the Chiefs and Raiders both finishing at 9-7, and then the Broncos at 7-9. Following this, rounding up the division would be the Seattle Seahawks at 6-10. 49ers quarterback Steve Young was named the league's most valuable player of the year, while Patriots coach Bill Parcells was named the coach of the year. Barry Sanders was the league's offensive player of the year, while defensive player of the year was Deion Sanders of the 49ers. Marshall Faulk was indeed named offensive rookie of the year, while Miami's Tim Bowens was the defensive rookie of the year. And now we're going to fast forward 10 more years to 2004 to see what the experts thought about the 2004 NFL season. The New England Patriots had won the previous Super Bowl, Super Bowl 38 in Houston over the Carolina Panthers and quarterback Jake Delhomme, 32-29. It was one of the most exciting Super Bowls ever, despite the fact that in the days and weeks following the game, fans who saw the game didn't talk too much about the plays on the field or the exciting climax of the Patriots' 3-point win. No, most people were talking about the halftime show. You remember the wardrobe malfunction and Janet Jackson? I bet you do. Well, anyway, the Patriots are the defending Super Bowl champions at this point, with Coach of the Year Bill Belichick, Peyton Manning of the Colts, and Steve McNair of the Tennessee Titans were named co-MVPs. Jamar Lewis of the Baltimore Ravens was the offensive MVP, while teammate Ray Lewis was the defensive player of the year. So, heading into the 2004 regular season, one of the biggest questions would be whether or not the Patriots would win back-to-back championships and become the next NFL dynasty, or would someone else come out to dethrone the current champions? These predictions that I drew from was from the Sporting Post publication by Frank Fleming, and I think, as I remember this was sort of the consensus of what a lot of prognosticators thought heading into 2004. Starting over in the NFC East, they predicted the Donovan McNabb, Andy Reid Philadelphia Eagles would win the East, followed by the Washington Redskins with new old coach Joe Gibbs, who replaced Steve Spurrier. Then the Cowboys with coach Bill Parcells, and rounding out the division would be the New York Giants and their new coach Tom Coughlin. I really don't remember how well Coughlin did, however. I may have to look that one up. In the NFC North, Fleming predicted the Detroit Lions to win the North with coach Steve Mariucci and quarterback Joey Harrington. Once again, please contain your laughter. There would be followed by the Packers, still with Brett Favre, and then the Minnesota Vikings, led by Dante Culpepper, who would lead the league in passing yards this season. And rounding out the NFC North would be the Chicago Bears and their new coach Lovie Smith. In the South, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were predicted to finish atop the wild NFC South, finishing ahead of the defending NFC champion Carolina Panthers. They would be followed by the Atlanta Falcons and then the New Orleans Saints, rounding out the division. Finally, in the NFC West, you had the Seattle Seahawks predicted to win the division, just a couple of years away from their own Super Bowl appearance, led by Matt Hasselbeck at quarterback and head coach Mike Holmgren. And predicted to finish second in that division would be the St. Louis Rams, still living off of the remnants of the greatest show on turf with quarterback Mark Bolger. Next, the Arizona Cardinals with new head coach Dennis Green, and rounding out the division would be the San Francisco 49ers. Over in the AFC, it was predicted the AFC East champs would once again be the New England Patriots, followed by the New York Jets, coached by one Herman Edwards, who was playing to win the game. Hello? Rounding out the division in the order predicted finish would be the Buffalo Bills and then the Miami Dolphins. Winning the AFC North would be the surprise team of the year to Mr. Fleming, the Cleveland Browns, and the predicted NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, Kellen Winslow Jr. Baltimore Ravens would finish a game out of first, riding their defense and strong running attack led by the 2003 Defensive Player of the Year Ray Lewis, Offensive Player of the Year Jamal Lewis, and the reigning Defensive Rookie of the Year Terrell Suggs. The Bengals would finish 7-9 on the season, followed by the Pittsburgh Steelers to round out the division. In the AFC South, the Peyton Manning-led Indianapolis Colts, who was the reigning NFL co-MVP, along with quarterback and anticipated second-place team, the Tennessee Titans and Steve McNair. They would be followed by the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Houston Texans, who were entering just their third season in the NFL. Rounding out the AFC would be the AFC West winners, the Kansas City Chiefs, which would be the predicted winners of the division under head coach Dick Vermeil. They would be followed by the Denver Broncos, then the Oakland Raiders, and rounding out the AFC West would be the San Diego Chargers and third-year head coach Marty Schottenheimer. In this publication, Fleming predicted that the Colts would defeat the Philadelphia Eagles in Super Bowl 39 at Alltel Stadium. Not bad. In Jacksonville. And finally, Peyton Manning would knock off Brady in the AFC Championship game. Manning would be MVP once again for the second season in a row. Lions coach Steve Mariucci would be named NFL Coach of the Year, along with Kellen Winslow Jr. winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. And Sean Taylor of the Washington Redskins would win Defensive Rookie of the Year. Fleming also had forecast that the Offensive Player of the Year would be LaDainian Tomlinson, while Defensive Player of the Year would be Tampa Bay middle linebacker Derrick Brooks. So, with all of that said, this is how it all turned out. The Steelers, behind Offensive Rookie of the Year one Ben Roethlisberger, would lead them to the best record in the NFL with a 15-1 record and champions of the AFC North. The Patriots won the AFC East at 14-2, with the Jets claiming the wild card at 10-6. In the AFC South, the Colts, behind NFL MVP Offensive Player of the Year Peyton Manning, led the Colts to another division title with a 12-4 mark, while this year's surprise team of the year were the San Diego Chargers with a 12-4 record and the division title out west. The Bolts' first playoff appearance in 9 years and their first division title since their Super Bowl year of 1994. Over in the NFC, the Philadelphia Eagles would win the East with a 13-3 record and home field throughout the playoffs. In the NFC North, the champions would be the Green Bay Packers at 10-6, while the Vikings were a wildcard team at 8-8. In the South, the Atlanta Falcons with Michael Vick and Coach Jim Mora Jr. would claim the division title. Over in the West, the Seahawks would win the division, and the St. Louis Rams would be the other wild card. In the NFC Championship game, the Eagles would knock off the Atlanta Falcons 27-10, while the Patriots would return to the Super Bowl with a 41-27 win over the Steelers. In Super Bowl 39, the Patriots reached dynastic status with their slim 24-21 victory over the Eagles, with the New England Patriots wide receiver Deion Branch game most valuable player. Moving on to the prediction of 10 years later to the 2014 season. Now, these predictions that we will highlight will be by Pat Curran of CBS Sports. And heading into that year, the Seattle Seahawks were the defending Super Bowl champions after dismantling Peyton Manning-led Denver Broncos at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. The questions leading into that season was, would the Seahawks with Russell Wilson, Marshawn Lynch, and Pete Carroll and the Legion of Boom defense be the next NFL dynasty? Would the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers or the New York Giants with Eli Manning dethrone the Seahawks? Another question that was asked, was this the end of the New England Patriots and their championship winning ways? According to Pat Curran, these were his predictions leading into that season. In the AFC East, the New England Patriots with Tom Brady and Coach Bill Belichick would maintain their position as division champions, followed by the Miami Dolphins led by third-year coach Joe Philbin. Then the New York Jets, still with Rex Ryan as coach, but it wouldn't be for much longer. Rounding out the division once again would be the Buffalo Bills. In the AFC North, Kerwin predicted the Pittsburgh Steelers with head coach Mike Tomlin and quarterback Ben Roethlisberger would take first place, followed by the second place team, the Cincinnati Bengals, followed by the Baltimore Ravens, and third, and rounding out the North, would be the Cleveland Browns. Kerwin predicted that this division was the best top to bottom and the best in the entire league. We shall see about that. Over in the AFC South, the Indianapolis Colts would be the team to win that division with young quarterback Andrew Luck. Remember Andrew Luck? He would be making strides to be the heir apparent to future Hall of Famer Peyton Manning, now with the Denver Broncos. They would be followed in the standings with the Tennessee Titans. The third place team would be the Houston Texans, followed by last place Jacksonville Jaguars. Then over in the AFC West, the Denver Broncos with the aforementioned Peyton Manning was forecast to finish with another division championship, while the second place team would be the San Diego Chargers with quarterback Phillip Rivers. Although still in San Diego, this was the beginning of the rumors that the Chargers would be moving north back to LA, where they were during their debut season of 1960. And rounding out the division would be the Kansas City Chiefs, then the Oakland Raiders. Kerwin predicted that the Patriots, Steelers, Colts, and Broncos would win the divisions, while the Chargers and Bengals would make the postseason as wild cards. And taking a look at what he foresaw in the NFC, the Eagles would edge Washington for the NFC East title, while the Giants and Cowboys would follow in that division. Over in the NFC North, the Packers, led by Aaron Rodgers, a player that Kerwin had predicted to win league MVP, they would be followed by the Chicago Bears, then the Detroit Lions in third place, with Minnesota finishing at the bottom of the division. Over in the NFC South, Kerwin predicted the Saints with Drew Brees and coach Sean Payton to win the division, followed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers led by former Bears coach Lovie Smith. They would be followed by the Carolina Panthers with Cam Newton at quarterback, and the Matt Ryan-led Atlanta Falcons would be the fourth team in that division. Finally, over in the NFC West, the Seattle Seahawks, eyeing a second consecutive Super Bowl title, will be picked to win the division, followed by the San Francisco 49ers, coached by Jim Harbaugh. There's that name again, Jim Harbaugh. Still trying to recollect where he's now. maybe someone could fill me in on what he's doing these days. I know he was at Michigan, but I heard he left Michigan, so now I'm trying to figure out, okay, where is he now? I don't know. They will be followed by the Arizona Cardinals, and then bringing up the rear, the St. Louis Rams, who will be on the clock in the upcoming years before moving back to Los Angeles. Kerwin did predict the New England Patriots to win the Super Bowl, and he would be correct, but the team he predicted that they would be incorrect. For Super Bowl 49, he picked the Patriots and the Packers. Could you have imagined the hype around that game? Yet, as it turned out, along with his Super Bowl predictions, it wasn't too far off as opposed to other that we've discussed here in this episode. Here's what actually happened. The New England Patriots did win the AFC East with a 12-4 record, but one of the pleasant surprises of the NFL season was the resurgence of the Buffalo Bills, who narrowly missed the playoffs at 9-7. They were followed by the 8-8 Miami Dolphins and then the New York Jets, who finished 4-12 and ended the Rex Ryan era with the Jets. In the AFC North were the Steelers winning the division at 11-5, followed by the Bengals at 10-5-1 on the season, with the Ravens finishing at 10-6. All three of the teams in this division made the postseason, so Curran was correct as far as it being top to bottom the best team in the division. Best team in the league, I should say. Down in the AFC South, the Colts with Andrew Luck won the division at 11-5, while the second place team went to Houston Texans. Then, by a large gap, Jacksonville and Tennessee rounded out the division with 5 wins, with only 5 wins between the two teams. Finally, in the AFC West, the Broncos will once again make the playoffs as the division title holders, while the Chiefs and Chargers each finished at 9-7, but failed to make the playoffs. More of what happened in the NFC. The Dallas Cowboys claimed the NFC East title with a 12-4 record with the Eagles in double-digit wins, but failed to make the playoffs. In the NFC North, you had the Green Bay Packers with another division title, followed by a surprise playoff appearance by the Matthew Stafford-led Detroit Lions at 11-5. In the South, it would be the Saints winning the division, but the Cam Newton Carolina Panthers, who little did anyone realize at the time was 1 year away from their second Super Bowl appearance in franchise history. 2 NFC playoff teams would ultimately come out of the NFC West, with the defending champs Seattle Seahawks at 12-4, while the Arizona Cardinals was a game behind them in the standings at 11-5. The Super Bowl in Glendale, Arizona came down to the last play of the game between the Patriots and the Seahawks, and we all know what happened. Russell Wilson passing into the end zone and his pass being intercepted by Malcolm Butler of the Patriots. Aaron Rodgers would ultimately win league MVP with the Packers, while Bruce Arians of the Cardinals was named the NFL Coach of the Year. Odell Beckham Jr. was Offensive Rookie of the Year, while Aaron Donald of the Rams was named the Defensive Rookie of the Year. So as you can see, as we've done here for like the last 45 minutes, you can see going through 40 years of NFL predictions, it is indeed both a crapshoot and an inexact science. Coming up on this edition of the podcast, I'm going to share my predictions for the upcoming season. Who will be hoisting the Lombardi Trophy at the end of the season? Will the Chiefs three-peat? Will the Texans and Bears live up to the hype of the offseason? Which team will surprise the experts and make a deep run in the postseason that no one expected? And who will be the league's biggest disappointment? All that and more coming up on the Historically Speaking Sports podcast here on the Sports History Network. You are locked into the Historically Speaking Sports podcast, a member of the Sports History Network. And just a reminder out there, you could follow us on Twitter at HistoricallySP2, and you could also write to the show with possible show ideas if you just want to say hello. You can write to us at historically.speaking.sports@gmail.com. Once again, that address, historically.speaking.sports@gmail.com. And also, do us a favor and check out some of the other shows here on the network. There are so many shows out here to choose from, including the Pigskin Dispatch with host Darren Hayes. He's one of our football history gurus, and with the new NFL season upon us, please check out his podcast to get your football history curiosity fulfilled with the Pigskin Dispatch, hosted by Darren Hayes, here on the Sports History Network. Now, in this episode, we have been talking about past NFL predictions that had gone wrong for one reason or another. So now it is my turn to make future podcasters and my current colleagues here at the Sports History Network laugh, cringe, and maybe even curse me. But that's par for the course. Heading into this NFL season, the Chiefs are the two-time Super Bowl champions and are looking to be the first team in the Super Bowl era to three-peat. Now, there are other questions out there to be answered this season. Over in the NFC, would Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers take that next step and win the Super Bowl? Would the Texans and the Lions respond to off-season hype, or will they take steps back? Would the Chargers and new coach Jim Harbaugh erase the failures of the past and finally live up to the potential of quarterback Justin Herbert? Could the Bengals and Jets keep their quarterbacks Joe Burrow and Aaron Rodgers healthy long enough to give the Chiefs competition in the AFC? All of those questions will be answered during the next several months of the NFL season, but for now, I will answer all of those questions for you as I predict the NFL season. Starting in the NFC East, I have the Philadelphia Eagles winning the division with an 11-6 record, while the Dallas Cowboys will finish one game behind at 10-7. Rounding out the division would be the Commanders at 9-8 and the New York Giants at 7-10. Over in the North, the ongoing Jordan Love project in Green Bay is continuing on schedule, as they will win the division at 11-6, while the darlings of the NFL season from a year ago, the Detroit Lions, will finish tied with the Chicago Bears, both at 10-7, as both will make the playoffs. In the cellar would be the Minnesota Vikings at 6-11, but could be a little better if they resolve their quarterback situation in Minneapolis. In the South, I have the Falcons winning at 10-7, mostly because, somebody gotta win it, right? Behind the Falcons would be the Saints and Bucks, both at 8-9, while the Carolina Panthers still looking to come out of the wilderness at 4-13. Out west, we have the San Francisco 49ers finishing at 12-5 with the NFC West title, a first-round playoff bye, and home field throughout the NFC playoffs. They will be followed by the Los Angeles Rams, who will be the only NFC team with double digits in wins, but failed to make the playoffs because of tiebreakers. Rounding out the division will be the Cardinals at 9-8, and then the Seahawks at 8-9. So, looking back in the NFC, I have the 49ers at the top seed, followed by the Packers, the second seed, then the Eagles, the third seed, and the Falcons at 4. Detroit as the 5th seed, and Dallas as the 6th seed, and the Bears at 7th. Over in the AFC, I have the Miami Dolphins, provided they stay healthy and don't get in their own way, getting past the Buffalo Bills for the division title. In fact, I have them and the Jets both finishing at 9-8. Neither of them making the playoffs, however, and then the Patriots in year 1 AB, after Belichick, will go 7-10. In the AFC North, arguably the most competitive division in the NFL, will essentially beat each other up during the season, but when the dust settles, the Baltimore Ravens will win the division with an 11-6 mark. A record equal to the Cincinnati Bengals, but the Ravens would have the tiebreaker. They will be followed by the Pittsburgh Steelers, who will go 9-8 on the season. Once again, Mike Tomlin will have another winning record. At the bottom of the division will be the Cleveland Browns, who will be a solid 7-10, but will be competitive throughout the season. One of the surprise teams of the year will be the Jacksonville Jaguars, who will win the much hyped AFC South despite the attention being paid to the Houston Texans. Both the Jags and Texans will finish at 11-6, but the Jags will capture the division by tiebreaker. Third will be the Indianapolis Colts at 7-10. And finally, with all due respect to my brother from another mother, Jeremy McFarland of Football is Family Podcast, I have the Titans going 6-11. Sorry, J-Mac. Over in the West, Who in their right mind will pick against the Kansas City Chiefs? I would love to do so, but I'm not that brave. I have the Chiefs winning the division, home field, and capturing a postseason first round bye. Finishing second will be the much improved LA Chargers, who has the talent to be at least 11-5 and challenge the Chiefs for the division title, but they're not quite there yet. Finishing third will be the Raiders, who with their glaring weakness at quarterback will be a hindrance for the Silver and Black. And rounding out the AFC will be the Broncos going 5-12. So the playoffs in the AFC will be like this. The Chiefs will be the top seed, followed by the Ravens with the second seed. Then the Miami Dolphins at 3 and the Jags at 4. The fifth seed will be the LA Chargers, then the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Houston Texans at 7th and 8th, 7th and final seeds. And yes, I have the Bills and Jets missing the playoffs. So with all of that being said, I have the Baltimore Ravens finally with Lamar Jackson at quarterback will win their franchise's third Super Bowl by beating the Eagles 27-23 in the Superdome, with Jackson winning Super Bowl MVP. The Eagles in that game will feature the newly minted league MVP Jalen Hurts. And the NFL Coach of the Year, I predict, would be none other than Jim Harbaugh of the Chargers. So, according to this, in the voice of Pat Summerall, there will be no three-peat. So sports fans, that will do it for this edition of the Historically Speaking Sports Podcast. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to give us a listen. This podcast comes to you from the Bill King Memorial Studio in the sports wing of TM4 Enterprises, located in suburban Atlanta in the shadow of Stone Mountain. To get more content of Historically Speaking Sports, you could check us out on Twitter at historicallysp2, or you can send us a line at historically.speaking.sports@gmail.com. And if you have not done so already, please subscribe to the show. It really helps us out a lot. Tell your family, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, hell, tell the passerby on the street if you think they like sports history. And until the next episode, stay blessed, stay cool, and be your best in everything that you do. It will make the world a much, much better place. Peace.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.